All right, welcome to Firepunk Racing Series Part 5. This is the time that we're going to talk about Pro Mod racing. Last one we covered UCC and the Pro Street truck, and we were talking a little bit about selling the Pro Street truck, moving into Pro Mod, and we've got Lynn and Cody and Larson that are all have been involved in the Pro Mod since it started, and we wanted to go over those details. So where do you want to start?
Oh, we'll start from the beginning. The first year we had some overlap with the Pro Street and the Pro Mod. The Pro Mod started as a customer project. Edgar Articono had bought this project. I believe he'd bought it. Well, he'd owned it for quite a while already and had the vision of putting a diesel in it. And he wanted to have the world's fastest diesel. And I don't know, in a roundabout way, it ended up at our shop.
He had intentions of doing this build himself. It sat in his barn for probably 4 years. And finally, he decided to just bring it up to us and have us finish it. And the intention was for us to debut the truck. And then him and his daughter, Amelie, were going to go race it. That was really the initial intention. And they had, that's why it ended up with a Save the Racks wrap, because it was his wife, Robin, had won a battle with stage 4 breast cancer, and they had started a Save the Racks Foundation, which is breast cancer awareness, that they would do various fundraisers and events for Breast Cancer Foundation, and that they're also avid hunters, so it kind of coordinated together with the Save the Racks with breast cancer and hunting. That's where the logo all came from. So that's how the vision for the S10 started originally. The S10 came to us. We didn't pick the S10 because we are Mopar guys through and through, but that was what we had to start off with. So, I don't know.
In its former life, it was a 2000 S10 Pro Stock chassis, had a big block in it. I think it had been...
I think it was 530s is what the fastest it had run before.
So fairly fast, but it was a single frame rail truck. And obviously it wasn't really set up to fit a Cummins. So we had to put dual frame rail in it. We had to move the firewall back to make our big long engine fit in there. And we had to update the cage to a 25 2-cert so that we could go as fast as we wanted to. So this is coming from a bunch of 4-wheel drive guys that, we didn't know crap from apple butter once it came to racing a big floppy 2-wheel drive truck.
Right.
So, once again, we started asking a bunch of questions, dug in, did the best we could. As far as getting the cage cert and that kind of stuff, it wasn't too difficult. Our NHRA cert guy is really good with giving good instructions and, how things need to be. So the first year, that was kind of the bulk of it, was getting the cage updated, doing the dual frame rail, getting the engine in it. And then, then's when the last 10% starts that kicks you in the butt.
Well, that was also 2018. We still had the Pro Street truck, and I was driving the Pro Street truck, and that's when we decided that it would be best for Larson to drive it. That was the intention, for you to drive it, just to get it thing going down the track, and then we were going to turn it over to Edgar, the Articono family, and
basically, figure it out, get all the kinks worked out of it.
Get it going straight to where it wasn't
and get it turned over back to Amelie and Edgar.
And you had gone to, Frank Hawley to get your original licensing?
Edgar, Amelie, and I went to Frank Hawley's drag racing school, which I had, probably 3-4 years of racing experience, and I thought I knew a lot, which I did, but I still learned a lot from Frank Hawley's. As far as, consistency, things to do, things not to do. Even if you have a couple years of racing under your belt, still think it's a good idea to go take that class, because there's things that you don't really think about that he brings to your attention, and it's still things that I have.
Which class did you take?
Oh, man.
You didn't take the 200 mile per hour one.
No, it would have been I was going for super gas, which in his cars, I ran low 9s.
But it gets you licensed to what?
It gets me licensed to 450s in the 8th. So it worked.
It's a good,
for the time being.
It's a good base platform class. For sure, we're going from, he was racing his mega cab in 770, and he had driven the quad cab a time or two. You'd race 670.
I raced 670.
So he had experience with racing, taking a lot of trees, but a 2-wheel drive vehicle is different. And it's like, what are the things you do? Where are you supposed to look? And do's and don'ts. Those were good things. We got him licensed and we started racing. And that was, we had put the deck plate motor, we had run it dry with no radiator in it. And we had it an aluminum head from when
First year we were still cast head.
First year was all cast.
Oh yeah, we
All
did
cast with the SMT rockers.
Yep.
It was a pain to
And
work
we
on.
were 3,460 pounds race weight.
Something like that.
Concrete in the head.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it just, you really do look at it going back, and it's like, man, I mean, it's leaps and bounds. But
So I can't even remember the first time we were on the track with the S10. I mean, we did some local testing.
It would have been local testing because we were going to try to
Build a
debut
ride.
it at Rudy's
Yep.
spring event of 2018, and we simply ran out of time. Towed the thing down there to display it. Straps came loose in the trailer. Messed up the brand new wrap.
A week old wrap. Yep.
Yeah, and it was the first time that Edgar was seeing the truck since we had done all this work, and here we are showing it to him with a messed up wrap.
Yeah.
We felt like idiots, but
I remember the stop that we were at. It was in West Virginia.
Oh,
It was like
man.
8 in the morning. I remember going, that's not good.
not good.
Not
Just
good.
surprised just because you're crazy driving.
It's probably it's also when we figured out bladder on it, because
Yeah.
we didn't run a bladder on it there for
Right.
the beginning. So
Yep.
As a
But I think-
bladder is something you put underneath the rear axle and you inflate it with air and it keeps the chassis from bouncing, which also keeps your shocks from wearing out. Something in race vehicles that with 4-wheel drive trucks, we never really thought about that much. But it really, with a big tire on the back, it's just basically bouncing on balloons and you'll wear out your shocks. And your straps will come loose because everything's flexing, gives slack in your straps.
But first time on the track, I believe we rented pacemakers
yep, with field of
Okay.
rod.
with Phil
Oh, yeah.
DeVry.
Yep.
Man, talk about
About forgot about that.
claustrophobic because still not used to it, not knowing what's going on.
Yeah.
Looking back at those videos from then to where we are now, spool up difference and launching difference and the stuff that we've learned, which that was also a 124-inch wheelbase at the time. And yeah,
You have to remember, we came from the Pro Street truck, which was triple turbos and mostly fuel only, which we had just started playing with more nitrous in the end of 2018 or the end of 2017. So we were going into single turbo and nitrous setup because we had done that for saving weight on the S10. So we were very green to the whole nitrous world. And what we thought was a lot of nitrous back then was not actually a lot of
it's
nitrous at
very,
all.
I look back at our nitrous setup that first year and look at the solenoids that we had, and they're tiny. I think the biggest we had was a 125 orifice or something like that.
Yeah.
So, nothing compared to what we're running now. So it took quite a while for us to really. It wasn't really till the start of the next year that we really started learning how much nitrous we could use.
Right. So do you remember how fast? I think we went like a 121 to the 60 foot the first test session out. I can't
something
really
like
remember.
that. I just remember the first or second pass that I ever did in it. I did maybe a 30 or 40 foot hit and coasted to I think it was a 770 exactly. I'm like, unbelievable.
I remember
I
that.
had just come from racing 770 in my mega cab, and I do a very little tiny hit, and I coast to a
it.
770. I'm just like, unbelievable. This thing's gonna move.
I mean, most of the first year we were running, I would say, in the 440 range, 450.
we were
started
like
in the
450s to
470s.
70s,
470s. Yeah.
70s and 80s.
Because
a
it
lot.
wasn't until Hardway event in the fall that we ran a 447.
Yep.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
We're in
it
a
took all summer to get it below 450s. That was the first
Yeah.
pass.
Yeah,
And,
you're right.
that was like a record.
That was.
Yeah, it
We
was.
ran a 455 and set a record.
'Cause what,
And then
was it Ben or was it Ryan that had
Ryan.
Ryan? Yeah,
Well,
Ryan.
Ryan ended up going then to
This-
No Mercy that fall and
Yeah,
bettered
it went-
our 440. I think that was when he went
32, 30,
28 or low 30s, something in
Yeah,
the
it might-
green car.
Yeah, in the green car. Yeah.
But yeah, so first race that we actually raced it at ODSS was TS.
Yep.
I don't know. What do you remember from that week? I don't remember a whole lot
The
of
main
it.
thing that I remember is that we
Broke a crank in the
in the pro street truck.
we did.
just convertible. Just convertible. Pull back.
But no, we raced Chase Lunsford in his car.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Raced.
attempted to. We couldn't spool the dumb thing.
I think we made Rawlings mad that night.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rollins. But we went like 470s.
Yeah.
That was our first event.
Right.
Was 470 something at
Well, and
479 at 160
something like that.
talk about a bunch of guys that, didn't know what we were doing with a big tire, 2-wheel drive vehicle. Like that whole first year, we didn't know what to do with a wheelie bar. We thought it was just to, keep the thing from flipping over. We didn't realize that the wheelie bar, you need to use it to get some wheel speed so that you can keep your tire around so that you don't go into wheel shake. And some of the slower vehicles, you can get by without it because you don't have to.
You can race on a dead hook tire.
Right, you can race on a dead hook tire, but when you really want to go fast, you have to get that tire spinning and get it round. So like I look back at videos and we've got the wheelie bars up at 10 inches. They're never touching because every time we would put it down, it would just bounce off of it and we'd lose the tire. And we didn't know if we should adjust wheelie bar or tire pressure or shocks or 4-link bars. Like had no idea. And I still don't fully have an idea. Sometimes it feels like a little bit of an educated guess.
It's really hard to get. It's really easy to get lost with big tire. You think you put a big dumb tire on this thing, you can throw whatever you want at it and it's going to go down the track. It is not that simple because if you underpower a big tire and drive into power, it shakes. If you overpower it, it shakes. You have to have it just right.
Well, and that's the other thing. Like, so not only were we trying to figure out this whole 2-wheel drive chassis thing, we were also trying to figure out how to make more power on a single turbo. So we're trying to develop our engine program and push it forward. At the same time, we're trying to learn this whole chassis thing. And believe it or not, every time you change power, your suspension setup changes. So
we'd finally get it going straight.
Yeah.
And we turn the power up and then it would go left again. And then you're back to adjusting the chassis. And those were the struggles. And that was when we started, it took till the end of the year till we figured out that we had a good bit of play in some of our suspension setups in the back. That was, it was 19 years old at that point.
Yeah. And I think like the end of 2018 was also when we had Charlie Stewart help us out some. We were out there just fishing for any advice we could get, and Edgar had a good connection with Charlie, and he came and helped us some. And like some of the things that he taught us, I think were valuable as far as like how tight your 4-link bolts need to be, and some of that stuff learned from him. But yet Charlie was also a super gas racer. I don't know, one of those
bracket stuff.
Yeah, bracket stuff where they like let off the button and then they go on a throttle stop and then whatever. So they were more concerned about dead nuts consistency, and they would race on a dead hook tire where we would race on a wheel speed tire. So some of his knowledge didn't translate to what we were trying to do, and it took us a while to kind of figure out the differences in some of that stuff. So
it's also when we started fighting transmission problems because they're down at Extreme Motorsports Park in Texas. That's when we did transmission swap at Edgar's place. That was the first time we'd ever had to pull it out.
Did we break the intermediate there?
I thought it has something to do with the sprag or something like that.
That's the first time, but then it was fine the rest of that year.
Yeah.
But then come the beginning of 19 is when we started. That added a whole nother.
And then I think it was also, wasn't it also 2018 that we really fought the trans brake and the bump?
Yep.
Yeah.
Couldn't get duty cycle right.
It was inconsistent. Like sometimes it would bump real hard, sometimes it would barely move.
It was really super dependent on fluid temp.
Yeah.
Made a really big difference. And part of that problem was we were using the Bosch for our bump box, and while the Bosch gives you full control of everything, it doesn't know what hertz that solenoid likes, and it doesn't know how long to leave it on and all that stuff. So it was stuff that we kind of started out with just straight up guessing.
Well, we called Rossler and asked what to set this at, and they're like, I don't know, the bump box usually does that.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't have a bump box. We had a Bosch that we could control the solenoid however we possibly wanted to, but we didn't have any information. So finally it was Bill Lutz that told me that he runs his bump box at 21 hertz.
Which he had fuel tech, so he kind of had the same situation where it's like he has to set it up.
So that's where we were able to grab that information from the gas world, the guys that are drag racing. We put that in the Bosch, and it's
made it a lot better.
Way better.
I mean, we did a no prep race at Killcare where we were lined up. Was it against Stinky Pinky? I believe it was. We were supposed to race him. And like looking at the time slips later, it looked like we'd had a really good race, but we literally couldn't bump into the second ball because the bump wasn't working right. And then We also lost at our race, I think first round to Brian Gray.
Yep. We wouldn't bump in.
Because it wouldn't bump in. So just stupid little frustrations like that just make you want to pull your hair out.
If you don't understand how a bump box works, a trans brake will basically bring on the third gear direct clutch and the reverse band at the same time. At least in a 48 RE, I explain it this way. So you basically you're putting the transmission in a bind, but you're holding the button which engages the direct clutch solenoid or direct clutch at 100% duty cycle, and a bump box will interrupt that 100% duty cycle down to 70% duty cycle for a fraction of a second and then release it. And that just basically makes that clutch slip just a little bit to where it lurches the truck forward. So if you don't get your duty cycle correct, it won't release the direct clutch long enough to actually let the truck move forward. And if you let go of the trans brake button and get back in, you'll be 6 foot past the line. It doesn't work. Ask Nathaniel DeLong. He tried that once. But those were the struggles with when you set up a new chassis. You're learning a power plant, you're learning a chassis, you're learning big tire, you're learning wheelie bars, you're learning so much. There's a lot to learn when you go into a two-wheel drive chassis at that power level when you're not running on a dead hook and you're trying to go faster every pass. So as you go faster every pass, everything changes. And you find the next weakest link every time.
I just remember how impossible it seemed like for us to make that thing go straight. Like every time we turned power up, it'd go left and just like we just didn't know what to do. So finally, when we started making some progress throughout the year, did we fight much engine stuff that year? I feel like it was fairly.
I don't think we did.
So. I mean, we weren't really
from that
making
standpoint.
In 18?
We weren't really making any power.
Yeah, we didn't
Right.
really. I don't even think we didn't do any engine swaps. I think in 18.
And then, so then coming into the end of the year, we went to Emerald Coast.
Yep, Emerald Coast went 447.
Went 447. So
that was in the finals too, I
Right, in
believe.
the finals.
very last pass went
So-
447, which outran my NHRA licensing, which I was licensed for 450, and we didn't think we would be anywhere near 450 in the first year, and I don't think
Nobody
it was,
even thought-
it
it
wasn't
wasn't even
brought
talked
to our
about.
attention at the event. It wasn't until the week after or 2 weeks after.
Somebody,
I don't know. We basically found out that our points got confiscated and that we needed to get licensed to go faster. So we went to Killcare and did quarter mile licensing so that I could be licensed to go faster. And that's when we went 694 at 202. The first year out that we had it, I was with a 455 eighth maybe.
455 eighth. So
that's really about the only time we've run that truck quarter mile.
Well, we would have at NHRA, I can't remember, was it spring of 19 maybe in Tulsa, Oklahoma? I think that might have been of 18.
No, that was 18 because that was when we still had the Pro Street truck and we tried single GT55.
Yep.
And we did fireballs. A lot of Jared
but
Lecca.
we were just running mid to upper sevens, I think, or something like that.
We had a good bit of problems because that's when we were fighting. We still had the mechanical water injection set up on it. Because we were getting water, we were getting stuff in the front cover, and there was a bunch of stuff that we were fighting. I do remember that.
But no, that was a monumental moment for us to run. I mean, like we were just going to go get licensing. It wasn't really anything about it. And the thing busts out 202 mile an hour. Like we were riding the EGT limiter the whole back half of the track. I think we were down to 900 microseconds going through the traps. And that was the first diesel through, well, I don't know,
No, I can't. I think John had already.
Somebody else had went.
One of the dragsters had gone 200 mile an hour, but that was one of the things that Edgar really wanted to do is hit 200 mile an hour. So we got that done, got him licensed, but we forfeited our points for that one race, which ended up costing us, which we were significantly ahead in points, but then we didn't get any points for that race because we outran our cert, and then
I think we just forfeited the final round.
The final 20 points.
Right.
Which
so we went into Rudy's a little bit behind Ben in points.
Yep.
And that turned out to be a really good weekend and a really bad weekend.
I believe it was 3 points we were behind.
Yeah.
It wasn't much.
So
really all we needed to do is win one round.
Well, went into that, and then during qualifying, Rudy's is kind of a creature of its own because when you're on big tires, Piedmont is. That track gets built with glue, And if you've ever raced a big tire before, a lot of glue and a little bit of rubber is really difficult, especially when you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So it's just really hard to not wad the tire up. Anyhow, went into that. Everybody struggled throughout qualifying. Ben struggled to the point where he ended up spinning out and putting his truck into the wall during qualifying. So he ended up loading up and leaving, and it came down to all we had to do was go 1 or 2 rounds. We can't.
No, one round.
Just one round.
Yeah,
First round.
We need to go 1 round to win the points championship. And we drew Michael Dalton in the first round, and I still remember, like, we had the discussion before we went up there, do we turn it down? What do we do? How do we make sure this thing goes down?
Because really, Michael was Pro Street Truck
right.
in Pro
And
Mod
Michael
at the
wasn't
time.
running anywhere close to the times that we ran when we went down the track.
Right.
Like, we really needed to get the thing to go down the track. And it was a cold morning. The track was really sticky. And I remember we had the conversation, like, what should we do? I remember I was fairly bullheaded in the fact that we shouldn't turn it down, because everybody that I talk to that knows big tires says you shouldn't turn it down and you'll dead hook it, and then you'll wad the tire up and you'll shake the tire. And so I felt like that was what we needed to do on the hit, and turns out it was the wrong call. And in reality, we should have probably just turned it down and let it dead hook and just not put a lot of power to it till maybe left lockup turned off. It's probably what we'd have done at this point.
The intention was, if it does knock the tire off, we'll pedal it and still be able to drive around it. But pretty much he lets off the button and the tire dead hooks and the truck just like jumps off the ground and starts shaking violently. And so Larson has to let out of it and tries to get back in it. But as soon as he gets back in it, the nitrous comes on and it backfires. And he comes back in it, nitrous comes on and it backfires. And so we lost the race. We lost the points championship. And we learned out of the data, we figured out that we have to set safety parameters in our nitrous kits to say, hey, let's make sure that it's back up to 20 pounds of boost before the first kit comes on, and it's back up to 40 pounds of boost before the second kit comes on. You have to set those boundaries to where now we can pedal the truck and it doesn't backfire and cut out. Unless it's really cold outside, then they'll still do it.
It will still do it.
Well, actually, with the new cam setup, it probably won't anymore.
Tough lesson to learn.
We definitely, I can.
It was a long trip home.
Yeah, it was. Like, I still remember standing in the back of the staging lanes, like they're behind the water box. Like, I couldn't forgive myself. But anyhow, lessons learned, I guess. We all, experiences like that make you hate losing even more and make you try to make sure.
So that was fall.
Yeah, and that was also the weekend.
That was the weekend we went 4s in the Pro Street truck, which was like huge. You know, like first Pro Street truck in the 4s, something that we'd been gunning for a long time.
Do you remember leading up to that with the Pro Street truck, how we left here that night?
Yep.
Like, we had just we'd gone away from the trans brake valve body stuff. We'd put back in what we knew, put this thing back together, and got it on the jack stands, I think, going through gears. And like the minute lockup would come on, this thing would start whining like we have never heard it. And it was aerating the fluid. Like,
the transmission lines were jumping like crazy. And it was 11 o'clock at night. We're supposed to be leaving.
Lockup pressure was way low. It was...
Well, we were like 180 pounds of line pressure. We're normally 200 to 205. And we were beside ourselves, but I said, you know what, we're putting this thing on the trailer, or we're going to race it until it quits, and then we're putting it right back in the trailer, and we're just going to go race the S10. But literally we went down there, unloaded off the trailer. We knew something was not acting right in the transmission with the valve body setup, and that thing goes out and goes 5 O's, like 4 passes in a row. Line pressure's lower than it ever was, and it just worked perfectly. And we went 507, 502, and then
first pass went 507. I know that. And then after that it was.
And then I wanted to go 4s, so I grabbed some nitrous jets when they weren't looking and loaded my own nitrous tune-up.
I caught him. I remember seeing him in the front of the truck with those nitrous jets. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, mind your own business. We thought we put a big nitrous tune-up in it.
I still have those jets in a bag.
Really?
It's pretty bad to look at. You're like, wow, those are like, oh yeah. I mean,
those are cute.
Yeah, exactly. One of those now looking at it.
But then it went out and went 497 that was in testing. We'd run the 5 O's because we came down a day early. and went testing. Then Friday, first round of qualifying, went 497 at 151. But the problem is when we went to round 2, we went to we couldn't run faster than 5.0 because
because of the cert.
Below 5.0 outran our cert. So we dialed it back just a little bit and went back out, and the truck took a hard turn to the right at about 300 foot.
You had that thing on like one tire.
Luckily, it was a buy run, wasn't it? Because first round, number one qualifier.
It was a buy run.
You were in there.
And in Q2, took a hard turn to the right, pretty much changed lanes, corrected it. One back tire was back off the ground. We got some pictures of it. I mean, it was like weird because the truck was powering through straight, and all of a sudden it just darted right. And through that whole scenario, we broke the hub, stripped out the hub of the front drive on our 9-inch axles, and that kept us from
So we had a one-wheel drive in the front.
Yeah, we kept us from making Q3, which we had. What was our plan? We
also, so through that whole thing, we had to. Wasn't that also the time that we had the drive shaft and the drive shaft was too long and it broke the transfer case?
That was it.
Stole it from Jersey.
I'm sorry, that was in the spring. That would have been in the spring. When we did that because that was before UCC when we went.
That's kind of side, but beside the point is we ran this record-setting pass, but it didn't count as qualifying. So we had to have a meeting to see if I would even be qualified to race in Pro Street. I had the fastest Pro Street truck on the field, and they were had to vote to see if we could even compete in eliminations but then they decided we would actually be bottom of the qualifying ladder just because we outran our cert.
Salty?
Well, that whole thing is, technically, we still have the fastest Pro Street truck, and it's still a technical record because they changed it to 4,400 pounds so Johnny could go faster. We did it at 4,500. Just kidding. But that was one of those things where everybody's bugging us all the time. Why don't you guys run quarter mile? Well, we have literally fought through certification problems through all of Pro Street. When you're that heavy, SFI does not want to give us, the diesel guys, faster certifications because it's just not safe to run that heavy of a vehicle that fast. And because of all this weight and SFI restrictions that we've had, that's why we keep pushing for lighter vehicles and to go faster, because you can go faster, safer in a lighter vehicle. Because if you hit something, or if you start barrel rolling at 150 miles an hour in a 4,500 pound vehicle, you're going to take 10 tumbles, as opposed to if you do it in a 3,000 pound vehicle, you're going to take 5 tumbles. And it's just a lot less likely to hurt the driver.
Yeah, so we learned a lot in 2018. We sucked at Rudy's. Well, and we did good at Rudy's. We did it all.
It was very much of a play on emotions that we did. It was like the highest of highs and the lowest of lows.
That really was. It really, truly was.
But we came home from Rudy's, and that's when we really had no intentions of selling the Pro Street truck yet at that point. Until we realized...
You didn't.
he might have, but...
We were all, like, that year, racing 2 trucks was, like, probably the dumbest thing we've ever done.
It's too much.
It's a lot of work. And we were burned out from pulling transmissions and working on stuff.
And UCC and...
We were kind of done with it.
We were done.
Kind of, when I saw Levon run that 4, I saw that he finally got that carrot he's been chasing so long, and I thought maybe there was a chance. But there was no way I was going to get Levon to list that truck for sale. So... It just so happened, Josh Scruggs called me one night, and he was talking about buying, believe it was Seth Sullivan's old truck, and talking about what he wanted to do, and, started looking at that, and it had a good base, but still needed a 25/6 cage. It needed a lot of work. And with what he wanted to do with it, I started going in my head, I'm like, I really wonder if there's a chance that he'd want to, buy a roller. So I made up a list in my head. I said, I remember sending him a text. It said, what if? It didn't say it was for sale or whatever. I said, what if you could buy a truck as a roller?
You sent Josh Scruggs this text.
Josh Scruggs this text. I said, what if you could buy, 25/6 cage, 9-inch axles? I had a whole list of everything that he wanted. Pretty much it was a ready-made roller. I said, what if you could buy it in this price range? I said, would you be interested? And he texts me back, and he's like, are you talking about the truck I think you're talking about? And I was like, maybe. And he's like, well, if that's the case, yeah, I'd be interested. I said, okay, let me talk to Levon. So I pitched it to Levon, and at first it was kind of like but I think it was by that weekend I kind of got him to at least consider it enough. And I think within a week we had kind of reached an agreement. Right. I think you talked to a couple people, and I forget who it was that kind of gave
Phil
you.
Taylor and a couple guys, and he's like, dude, you got a buyer for it with a roller, make it go away. Like, go race the S10 and go have fun.
I was gonna say it helped a lot too because you ran 4s.
Yeah,
Yep.
We had won UCC 3 times, which that's what we had built the truck for originally. Right. You were planning on having a kid right around the same time as UCC 19.
And we all knew that, like, if we didn't sell this truck, we were going to have to go to UCC again.
Right. Well, that was a big deal because UCC and my wife's due date was within a week apart, and I was trying to figure out how this was all going to work out. And we had, when you run a 497 and then you don't make qualifying because the cert, you outran your cert, it's really a buzzkill because what's the next thing you're going to do with the truck? Run 4s again?
I mean, try to turn it into a 5.0 bracket truck was really what you would have tried to do at the time. But
which now SFI did make an exemption to where, ODSS made an exemption because we're not running quarter mile. They moved the Pro Street weight down to 4,400 pounds, and you can run as fast as you want. So
in the 8th mile.
In the 8th mile. They said just knock yourself out. So that problem did kind of resolve itself.
What, 2 years later?
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah, 2 years later.
2 years later.
But altogether, I think one thing we didn't cover on the Pro Street build was some of the, like, we pretty much given props to everybody, Corey Dow and JP Liepert. They had built a really lightweight truck in, I don't know, they started this build a long time ago.
They started it well before we started the Pro Street truck, and really most of the build was on Comp D. And I know that was a truck that, like, I had a lot of that build printed out on my clipboard when we were building the Pro Street truck, and it was something that we kind of aimed for, like, definitely got ideas from, and like that truck was cutting edge.
But when we built the 9 inches, we spent a lot of time on the phone with them, made sure that, and they kind of told us where to get the CV axles, what the outers
the front axle
used.
was the difficult part because it's now you're taking a 9-inch front end and you're running it backwards. In essence, what you're doing. So at first, like looking at the 4-wheel drive world, I didn't know, do I have to get a high pinion something where you're actually running on the front side of the gear, like the way gears get hardened and stuff. So that was a big question. And then how to set up the inner and the outer knuckles, and whether you use a unit bearing, what unit bearings do you use? What differential can you use in the front? Like, just a lot of different things. Like, kind of had the idea of what you needed to do, but, how to put it together. You can use a unit bearing, or you can use a spindle and hub setup.
Right. But those were guys that were really instrumental in helping us walk through that process and getting it. And I think that's also why when Josh was looking at a Pro Street truck, he was looking at all those steps that were really kind of hard to find in the industry at the time. And when he had an opportunity to buy a truck that had all that stuff already done to it, kind of the homework was already done. It was like kind of an easy button for him. He's like, I could buy that truck, throw a power plant in it, and go racing.
Yeah.
But that's what we did, is we ended up Lynn had instinctively texted Josh. Josh had expressed interest. It took me about a week to just say, if he'll buy it, let's sell it. And it fell together quickly. And that was by PRI that year. By December, he
brought you a ball joint press.
Yeah. Josh bought the... Josh took his 590 truck to PRI, and the guy who bought it was from out west somewhere, Wisconsin.
I don't know.
And that guy brought him like a lot of cash. And Josh turns around and just comes into PRI and like hands me this ball joint press box full of cash. And so here I am at PRI going like, I'm
staying at a hotel.
Right.
My truck's in a parking lot. I'm walking around a convention. What do I do with this cash?
I just didn't trust anybody but me, so I carried around a box full of many thousands of dollars all weekend, and I just told the guys around me, like, help me protect this ball joint press here. So I just, but that was kind of nerve-wracking. 3 days of PRI walking around carrying this box of cash. I just didn't trust leaving it in my truck at the parking lot, and I didn't trust leaving it at the hotel, which hindsight I probably could have, but oh well. That was 2018. So moving on to 2019, That was when we shortened it, and we then went back out. One of the first events was UCC, and we were racing it there, and they had a pro mod shootout Friday night.
We started out Florida
Okay.
in spring, and so what I remember from that Florida race, that was the first that we had gone to the pressurized water injection system. So we used to have a gear-driven hydraulic pump off the front cover with a Simpson valve, like a lot like the big tractor pullers run. There's a good bit of weight involved in that, and we also kept having trouble with the seal leaking on the pump, where we would start getting some water into our oil. So Edgar really wanted to go to the pressurized system. I think the Bully Dog trucks or the Predator trucks, something back in the day had done that. So that was something he wanted to try, and we were really leery because we had never seen it work. We didn't know how to size everything, didn't know how it all needed to work. So talked to NX, Snow, water injection. We got a system from them. They were able to get us a bottle and everything. Well, what we learned,
Forgot about that.
yeah, I mean, the idea of the bottle was great, but they would regulate the pressure down to like 400 PSI. They had this tiny little solenoid, and they had these, I don't know, some kind of
It's like
nozzles.
a spinner.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know.
I don't know
Weird.
what they had, like a 2-piece nozzle that turns out if you run too much pressure through them, you can blow them apart and run nozzles through your engine.
We did that.
So we did that because we right off were like, this regulator's dumb. Let's throw it away. We need more pressure.
Well, we done calculated.
We needed to get more water in it. I mean,
we
that was
calculated
pretty much,
the orifice size, and we're like, that's not going to be enough water. Okay, let's just run full pressure.
Right.
Well, we
Ran full
thought
pressure, and it blew the tips right off the nozzles.
Well, and before that, we weren't going to take the regulator off, but the main reason we knew we were going to need more water is because we were going to Outlaw Streetcar Reunion down in Kentucky.
That's kind of a thing, and it's I mean,
Yeah, keep going.
yeah.
But yeah, and we were going to try some stuff down at, I know,
That
we
was
were gonna, we were gonna
That's
try some
kind of
things down
a
there.
separate can of worms. I'll get to that, but
I just remember
being in Florida.
Yeah.
Like sparks come flying out of the exhaust. We're like, what was that? We don't know what that was. And finally, we made it through the weekend, I believe.
Yeah.
But we had a chewed up turbine wheel, and I don't know if it ended up doing anything to the
It just
pistons or
peppered
not.
the
It wasn't
pistons.
anything
It's
crazy with the
nice,
pistons.
cool design.
But so from there, we learned that for one, we need way more water. So we ended up going to an NX 375 solenoid, which actually flowed the water that we needed. And then we went back to the Simpson nozzles that could actually flow the water that we needed. So after learning what we needed to do to get the water that we need, that system has ended up working really well for us. I think we saved about 20 pounds doing it, and we don't have that mechanical pump to worry about anymore when we run RPMs and stuff. But then that was also the race that we first really started trusting our RPM limiter, or not RPM limiter, our EGT limiter to keep things in check, and we became more confident in actually throwing more nitrous at this thing. Did we have an O2 sensor on it at that point?
No.
So O2 sensor didn't happen for another
the
year.
Bosch would still calculate a calculated air-fuel ratio, but it wasn't a true wideband O2 in the exhaust. But we had an EGT limiter that when we could set it at 1800 degrees, if it went over that, by 1900 degrees, we were at 80% fuel quantity. By 2000 degrees, we were at 50% fuel quantity. But that EGT limiter works flawlessly.
Right. So then that spring at Emerald Coast, we broke a record again. I want to say that's when we went 427 or something. We beat Ryan's previous fall speed at
Ducks race.
So that was like, we went from 440s to, high 420s. So 428 is what comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
So we came away from that feeling like we had learned a lot. Like we actually turned some nitrous up. We were getting to that air fuel ratio closer to what we like to run now. We were able to lean things out and everything. So went from that. Then we had the UCC.
Yep. Then we went 425.
We went 425 there. 1320 video was there. That was really cool. They got that whole thing.
I remember that.
And then, like Cody said, we also went somewhere right in that time frame. We went to the Outlaw Streetcar Reunion.
Beach
Well, the two things that Edgar really wanted us to do, one was the pressurized water, and he was right. That worked. That was a good thing. The other thing he wanted us to do, he kept wanting us to run water meth. And we had tried it a little bit the year before at shied,
Yeah.
we had put in like a 20% mix, I believe it
20,
was.
80, something like that.
And we immediately saw temps jump.
Yeah.
And so we were like, we're going to scratch that. We're going to go back to just water injection. And Edgar said, well, the mixture wasn't strong enough. You need to go 50-50 mix. Like that, you know.
And he had a lot of knowledge behind it, though, really.
Right.
I mean
it
with all
made
the
sense.
planes,
Just-
like all the...
I mean, he had done quite a bit of research on it. So we went to Outlaw Streetcar Reunion with the confidence of we have an EGT limiter that will catch it if it doesn't work, and we're going to try it. We'll give it a good, good solid try. Well, the thing that we didn't think about is that methanol is a fuel and nitrous is not.
Right.
So now when it gets to the EGT limiter and all that meth is there, and you start leaning the fuel out,
it keeps running on the methanol.
It keeps running on the methanol. And within 2 or 3 seconds of letting off the button,
it took 2.7 seconds to have 6 melted pistons.
We had oil everywhere, and we had splattered aluminum everywhere, and it was a hot mess.
Took an oil bath from the knees down on that one.
Yeah.
Our oil retention system didn't put. It might have put a couple of drops
we
on
the return rod.
They were making passes.
Yep.
So that's a testament to good belly pans in a race truck. It is really good when you can have an oil mess on a truck. We melted pistons and it pushed oil out of every seal, and it didn't put a drop on the track.
We've had other instances where we have valve cover problems or different things like that, where we have definitely bathed a lot of the truck in oil and haven't. I know at Lights Out we fought that a couple of times and were able to avoid oil downs on the track. So.
But it was interesting watching the data log because EGTs went up to 1800 and fuel trimmed down, and EGTs just kept rising. And what happened, the methanol was going into the airstream because it was injected in with the water. So when there was fire in the hole, and the fire just never went out. It just pretty much stayed on the whole time, and so it just smoked the pistons. And even though the ECM had trimmed the fuel quantity way back to almost nothing, it had nitrous and it had fuel being injected, so it's like an injector pulse width that never shut off.
So Edgar was 1 for 2 on the new ideas. Learned some good things and learned some bad things. I don't know. We got it back together, what else we do that year?
That really slowed us. That was the main. 425 was the best thing we did in 2019. I can't really remember coming to the end of 2019.
I think at the end of 19. Well, I know for starters, we went pretty fast to PDRA, didn't we? At the PDRA race,
relatively,
we might have went 430s, but then that's when we also realized that the GT55 platform had a pretty hard limiter on when it would
that was still
go.
the 88,
That
wasn't it?
That was 91.
No, that was 91
But
with
it was pre-waste gates.
We had no waste
gate.
Kept adding nitrous, going faster, and at 133,000 RPM shaft speed, a GT55 will come apart. And which we have provisions in the Bosch to set a limiter that once it sees a certain shaft speed to defuel, to trim fuel back, but we didn't know where the limit was, so now we do.
And we wanted to go faster, so we just kept turning the limiter
We're going to be on TV. That limiter is going to just it's going to take a Ryan Milliken nap real quick and stop and be non-existent. So.
But so now we have a turbo shaft speed limiter set at 125,000 RPM that anything beyond that trims back down to 80% fuel quantity, and we can keep from blowing up turbos. But those are all things that you have to learn the hard way because you don't really know until you've had a failure. And it's good information to have moving forward. So it's every race truck that we set up after this. Actually, we got a truck on the dyno right now that we're working on this afternoon that we were just talking about that, making sure that turbo shaft speed stays under control. A lot of our daily drivers don't have provisions for shaft speed, and that's why these work stock turbos that make 900 horsepower, they come apart because you overspeed them. Okay, let's move forward to 2020. That was...
so really that's when there was a good bit of transition in that winter. That was when Edgar had sold his concrete business.
Yeah.
And so that kind of changed things for him quite a bit. And he came to you kind of with 3 different options, I believe.
Yeah.
He had decided that he was, at least for the next year, he was going to not race. So we either could let the truck sit, or he said, I think we could race it just on our own dime, or we could buy it.
Right.
So then that's when we ended up going for the option of buying it.
Right.
And that was also right at the same time that Drew was getting the billet engine done. So that kind of put us in a little bit of that was part of the motivation that helped us just decide that we were going to buy it, because we'd been looking for this billet engine for, 2 or 3 years. And finally it was actually happening. And now we weren't sure if we were going to have a race truck. So we really felt like we just need to buy this thing and move forward with it.
Right.
So we bought it in the winter of 2019, 2020, and the billet engine got done. When did it go to the dyno? I don't really remember some of
It would have been like
December.
It was right soon after PRI.
It was in December.
We went the first time we went before PRI, and we had the bridge issues.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So
it broke a bridge.
we moved the valves around, so we had to make custom bridges, and he hadn't gotten the heat hardened right, so we broke a bridge. So he went back and revisited that and fixed it. We had the engine ready to go at PRI, I believe.
well, we had dynoed it before. Well, obviously,
Right.
Yeah, we
and then
dynoed it before.
and then we went
the
back.
engine was at PRI, was it not?
Yeah, it was at PRI,
Yep.
and then it went back to the dyno
straight from there. I'm
straight
pretty sure.
from there. And then that's when we were able to, that was the first time we actually took nitrous to the dyno.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we were able to dyno, what was
3214.
Yep.
So that was the first time we'd ever done over 3,000 horsepower with a common rail setup. Did 3,214 horsepower, and that was nerve-wracking.
That whole 3 to 4 days was just a nice.
That was just you two that went to the dyno.
We learned a
Well,
lot.
initially I didn't.
We had the Kistler.
Oh, you didn't
I
go
was
out?
there the first time.
He was
Yeah.
because that's when we had some other issues, which I don't think it's really any secret that, obviously making stuff like that, stuff breaks, because that's when I left here at about 10 o'clock at night and went to Drew's and helped them because we had valve stuff. That was our first sign of valves starting to tool up a little bit.
Okay, so we had gone oversized valves, and
We had the head off at the dyno and went back for one more day, and that's when everything went relative smooth, and that's when we ended up doing that number. That was when flames, all that things.
Talk a little bit about the Kistler.
Well, the Kistler data. So Kistler is cylinder pressure monitoring on steroids, because it's not just like a pressure reading. It tells you all kinds of stuff. So it ties in with, knows your RPM and knows how much energy you're putting into your crankshaft based on the pressure. It has all kinds of calculated values. And so we were able to adjust timing up, timing down, fuel quantity. We could see how cylinder pressure directly correlated with horsepower. Every time we added power, it added cylinder pressure, and you'd see exactly when combustion would happen, and then it would taper off. Like the pressure would taper off after the run, but while it's still putting energy into the crankshaft until the exhaust valve opens. So in this data, you can see right when the intake valve opens, because cylinder pressure starts increasing. You can see the piston coming up, compressing. You can see exactly how much pressure it takes before the fuel combusts. And then you see the spike in cylinder pressure for the combustion event. You see how long the combustion event lasts. And then you see how much energy is still going in the crankshaft when the exhaust valve opens. And we were still seeing a good bit of energy going into the crankshaft when the exhaust valve would open, which gives us good direction that, hey, we need to change the profile of the cam to let the exhaust valve stay closed a little bit longer to get that energy into the crankshaft. That is valuable data. Like, we'd never had that information before, and it really is pretty cool to see. We actually had taken, we were at 300 milligrams of fuel, which is a pretty small shot in comparison. On most street trucks, that would be in the, 1,200 horsepower range worth of fuel quantity on a fuel-only setup. But we had done, I think, we were on the 98 at that point, or were we still on the 91?
No, we were 98. It was 98.
And I think we had done 1,390 horsepower on fuel, or 1,360 on 300 milligrams of fuel. And then we started adding nitrous, and we added nitrous, and we added nitrous, and we kept watching our air-fuel ratio go from 16 to 1, 18 to 1, 23 to 1, 26 to 1. Every time we leaned it out more, it still made more power. And on the same fuel quantity that made 1,360 horsepower on fuel, we ended up at 1,970 horsepower with nitrous. So we have all this horsepower that we've added with nitrous with the same fuel quantity just by leaning it out. And then we added nitrous again, and then we actually had a misfire because we had added so much nitrous that it cooled the cylinder temperature down that there was no way for the fuel to combust. Because we could see it in the Kistler data, the piston would come up, start compressing, we would have 2,500 psi of cylinder pressure, the injector would fire and no combustion event because the nitrous had cooled it down so much that it couldn't fire. So now we know that around 31:1 air fuel ratio, then you can actually put the fire out in your cylinder. So now in our today's racing, we look and we target 26:1, somewhere in there, 28:1, we know is really lean, about as cool as we can get it, and we're not going to have to worry about putting the fire out. But that's information that we gathered on the billet motor dyno session that was very, very valuable.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that we learned, and I mean, we could really go a lot more in depth with that. The other thing I'll probably touch on a little bit here is the whole air-fuel ratio thing with diesel, where when you're really on the rich side, like a sled puller, your temps are in check. So that would be what, like a 14:1 probably, or 12 to 1.
Or 13 to 1.
And then when you get up into that 18 to 20 range, that is about when we see the hottest temps on EGT wise. And then you start swinging back around to lean, where you get up into that 25 to 28 to 1 range. Then you start cooling temps back down. So we learned that, the middle of the road with nitrous is not the way to go. Like that's where you make the most temps, you're going to tear up the most stuff. And you see a lot of guys with street trucks, when they have a rich setup, they have a lot of fuel and they don't have a ton of turbo. Well, let's just add a little bit of nitrous to this thing to make it go faster. They're pushing that thing right into that danger zone.
And that's into butane torch and just smokes a piston.
Right. So one, you have to have good data, but if you're going to run nitrous, get that thing to the lean side.
Yeah. Well, pull your fuel back, add a bunch of nitrous. I mean, we took a completely stock 06 truck just last week that had a completely stock truck, minus it had we just put a head on it with ARP 625, so we wouldn't lose a head gasket, but it had stock lift pump, stock injector, stock CP3, and it had a stock appearing 63, 67 turbo. And it did 549 horsepower on fuel only, which is on power, pretty good number really for a stock lift pump truck. Had a built trans. And then we added a huge shot of nitrous, basically a bottle cracked right into the intake. And it did 905 horsepower. So we sprayed like 359 horsepower into this thing with stock fuel quantity. And that's just going all the way to the lean side of the curve. And a lot of people don't realize how much power you can add with nitrous. And in a race truck, if you go all the way on the lean side, now your power is very responsive to your fuel quantity. And on the S10 with the Bosch, we do fuel quantity versus time. So we can make fuel quantity go up and down wherever we want to keep the tire from losing the tire. If we've got a transition in the track, we can dip fuel quantity, and with all the way on the lean side, it pulls 300 horsepower out of it just like that. We can take it out for a half of a second and put it right back in and make it go down the track.
Yeah, anyhow, so much for that rabbit trail. But going into 2020 was really a year of transition. Big transition from multiple different ways. Like the billet engine went in it. We lost, and we got the truck down to 3150, something like that, race weight.
Like that.
So that was an advantage. And then Hot Shot Secret came on board. So that's when the truck changed looks.
Well, they were already on board.
Well, they were on board, but they became title sponsor for the truck.
And I will say,
go ahead.
And this is, and the Articota family was passionate enough about their breast cancer awareness that when I bought the truck from them, instead of just writing them a big check, they had me write a $25,000 check to Breast Cancer Foundation and then paid them the balance for the truck because they really wanted to promote breast cancer awareness with the truck. So they really did have a passion for they were passionate about their foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So then we had a race truck with a billet engine, and then the lovely pandemic happened.
Made one race. Because on the way home from Florida.
That is right. We were at
race.
Well,
we stopped at.
Now that you say that, like I remember being in Florida, we went to that one restaurant like within a week, everything was shut down. I
Well,
mean,
on our way home, we stopped at Texas Roadhouse,
Texas Roadhouse,
Texas
or something
Roadhouse,
like
and
that
they're like,
in
"Hey,
Louisville, or
this is going to be our last." Like,
yeah, they closed at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
They closed early that night because
and that was the
Because
start.
coronavirus was coming.
I remember Derek Rose, they had been on a pretty long trip and like he was calling home, like people were having issues getting bread and milk.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, because it was a
people were
disaster.
freaking out, like all that stupidity. But yeah, just thinking back of that whole thing of like not really knowing what this was and how crazy it was going to get and how it was going to affect our whole year.
Because
But then,
Rudy's got canceled that year.
I mean, a lot of stuff got canceled.
Our event got canceled that year, and then
it was
Wagler's-
finally like what, June-ish
Yeah,
or
I
something,
think
maybe
June,
early
July.
July.
We only raced
that-
once.
Well, they had those
twice.
two. They had
We
those
had
two
two
Wagler races.
Wagler
back, Like
races.
those were the first ones.
No, I know.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
yeah,
guess
yeah.
from
Before,
from Florida to even the Wagler
Right.
race, we were still a month and a half.
Yeah.
2 months because we're like, what? Like, we're
And I remember we're all sitting here going stir crazy, and Jeremy had planned to do this race, and I think Diesel World was kind of putting it on, and it was going to be. I mean, the hoops we had to jump through. I mean, we couldn't bring our kids. We all had to sign waivers and supposedly had to wear masks up at the starting line, or I don't know. We weren't supposed to congregate in the pits. Like, come on. Like,
that was bad.
and then like last minute, right before this, like I think he had somebody try to just shut it down. And then Jeremy's whole thing was, he's like, the local golf course is open. Why can't I race? And he's like, we're just going to become a golf course and we'll go golfing with our golf carts and down the track. Like, I don't know. That was the big joke at the time, but we ended up getting a couple races in, and it was really weird because, I mean, you had to take everything because nothing was open. I mean, we packed food and drinks, and, concessions weren't open there, and it was
like
definitely a very different feel. But then we did the Wagler race, and then there was that no prep race at Edgewater. I believe that was early July. And that was a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, it really
That was the
There was
first.
like 10,000 people.
They had some of the
nuts.
street outlaw guys there.
Yeah.
So everybody wanted to come see street outlaw guys. They were cooped up. And
It was
I
packed.
think it was 10,000 people in
It
there.
was insane.
We saw like maybe 10% of the people wear masks. And it was like all of a sudden this little island of normalcy in the middle of this just desert of misery.
They had like a 3-mile line from like 3 p.m. in the afternoon to finally shut the gates at 9 o'clock in the evening. It was crazy.
And we also went fast with the Pro Street truck. That was when when Scruggs went 80.
He went
No, 90 and a 91.
99?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought he went 80s there, but
No.
maybe I'm wrong. No. Okay. That was.
But that was the first.
Yeah.
That was the first that he'd gone fast, really fast with that one. Which that was also probably one of the first times that we were out after he had like the full Bosch system and everything on it.
Yeah.
So that was a really fun. Was it just a Saturday night or
Friday night?
Yeah, was it a Friday
Friday
night?
night because we left a little early. We're like, oh, might as well if we get a chance to race this year.
And then we did really well with the S10 as well. Went rounds and ended up winning the thing.
I mean, technically we won, but
No, we won.
No,
we split the pot.
yeah, we
with,
won,
With
we
Lutz.
split.
Yeah.
Lutz was
against-
broke in the finals, and so we couldn't actually make the final pass, but we did take the win.
Yeah.
Because turns out you have to race if you want to win, and we were able to race, and he wasn't. So
Yeah.
oh well. But no, we didn't really go faster than our 425 pass at UCC in 2019 until Emerald Coast in 2020, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's when we won a 421.
Yeah. So like it took us like all of a year.
Which,
Obviously,
right
with the
soon after that
pandemic,
425 is when we put methanol in it.
Right.
Melted all the pistons. That kind of like scared us, and then we kind of had to grow back into it. I don't know. Anytime.
That 420 barrier was a brick wall that we ran into for quite a
It's
long
still
time.
hard.
Close to
Still
2 years. I mean,
hard.
we're still technically there.
I mean,
Well, we went
we had
pa- I mean,
418.
Yeah, we won a 418, but
most races, the conditions have to be right.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing that we really fight a lot is track conditions and temperature and everything. Everything changes so much from every race. We don't go testing as much as we should.
Well, yeah.
And it's just really like balancing work and racing is a tough thing to do. Where we go to a race, you show up, you have 3 qualifying passes to get it right. Like you need to make the thing go A to B in 3 passes. If you can do it in 1 or 2 passes, you might have one freebie to go try something crazy.
Fast, yeah.
But then you go right back to having to make the thing go A to B. So the objective isn't try to break records, it's that you need to go round.
Right.
And it's
if you go up and let off the button and it knocks the tire off, you're going to lose. And we've done that before, so we know that in the 3 rounds of qualifying, we want to get a solid tune-up that we know goes down the track. So if you do that, nail that in the first pass, the second round, we'll throw a Hail Mary at it and turn it up and try to put a good number on the board. But then Q3, you're going back to make sure your A to B tune works so that you're ready for E1. And then by the time you go to the next track, the conditions are different, and so you probably have to change things.
And we don't. And that's like a lot of. I know, at least from outside looking in, type a lot of people are always just like, man, you guys race every single. Which, in a grand scheme of things, and we do race a lot, but when you really kind of look at it, I mean, we test some. But I mean, there's not near as much as we should. As we should. But at the same time, it's not like
it's hard to get away from work.
It's a lot of. It's a lot. So
it's a lot to work.
Yeah.
But we went then fall of 2020. We went to radial tire racing.
That was the start of a new one.
Yeah, that was one of the good things that came out of the pandemic was that we didn't have the Rudy's Fall race, and so it kind of freed us. It opened up our schedule to actually be able to go to No Mercy and go radial tire racing. And we had talked about wanting to do that for a long time, but we were also pretty determined that we weren't going to go try to figure out radial tires until we had a power plant that we felt like we knew we didn't have to worry about the engine side of things, at least for the most part. We wanted to be able to go there and concentrate on doing chassis things and learning how to make a radial tire go fast.
In 2020, I mean, we went 99 passes that year without touching the motor, right?
Yep, we went a lot of passes.
Something like that.
And then the start of our radial tire racing career, I guess you could say, is probably when we started fighting things. But we leaned on the damn. I mean, I don't think you realize how. Yeah, I mean, we went beating on it.
We went 4:11 at 181 the first time out on radials. Not the first pass.
The first weekend.
I
think we're missing I think one of the most one of the weeks I remember the most was when we went to Ryan's track. On a radio and when we got
that was where we started out at Emerald Coast on Monday, and we went there, had never been on a radial tire, and we had talked with the guys at Mensker, and that's another one I haven't really mentioned. John Mellon and Mark Mensker, they've been like, we wouldn't be half of where we are without those guys. We run all their shocks on our truck. We really run it on all of our builds. But John especially has really taken interest in the diesel trucks. And I have pestered him and bugged him. And I mean, they're always at the radial tire races. And so that always helps a lot too, where they're on site and can help us with chassis things. So thanks a lot to those guys for their help with it. But we started out the week at Emerald Coast, and John had told me kind of basic settings where to start at, but obviously you don't really know where for sure to start. So
we were used to leaving at 3,800 RPM and 40 pounds of boost, and by the time the day was over, we were at 3,200 RPM and 16 pounds of boost.
So we went out there, let off the button, 6 or 8 times?
Five times.
5 times.
Pulled the trans,
change
a stator, and zinged it 3 more times, and the last 2. The one it moved 4 or 5 foot, and then we ended up getting it to
through 60 feet.
Yep, through the 60 foot, that last pass, and we're like,
we actually had a pretty good 60 foot. Well, I mean, I want to say it was one of the better 60 foot we've ever gone.
Yeah, it was.
I'm going to say it's 107. Yep.
So by the time we left Emerald Coast, we had never made a full pass, but part of that was also the fact that he had the bump out at 100 feet, and every time we get to the bump, we'd lose the tire. Yeah. So finally we said, you know what? We can make this thing go 60 feet. We feel like we have a decent enough start to go to SGMP. So went there, rolled in there Tuesday, and
eye opener.
It's really cool.
But
wasn't it? I mean, one of the first passes we let off the button there, it went down and went pretty decent. I thought
4:17.
Yeah, we went something like that. Something. 3rd or 4th pass, I think.
Yep.
And
so once we had the thing, in the ballpark, we really had stuff to work off of and felt like we could make pretty good progress. And I don't remember the how it all went, other than like I know we fought. We fought the valve. Didn't we find the oil and?
Yep, that's when some issues and just that come with, I think, R&D and being the first to do a good bit of that stuff with that engine.
We thought our week was almost over before it even started because we ran into some crankcase pressure issues. We had nitrous backfired the thing some, and our crankcase pressures were way up. And we came back from one of the first full passes with an oil bath everywhere. And so we didn't know how bad it was hurt. We ended up giving the thing a bath and decided to put it back on the limiter. And we decided if it, sounded good, we're going to keep rocking it. Well, it sounded good, so we kept racing, and we'll just say the truck got a few brake clean baths that week.
Yeah. And we knew the valves we knew they were moving, and we run valves, every pass or two. I mean, at this point, honestly, and we knew we're moving stuff, but I mean, you're pushing an engine that hard, so it's just part of it.
We were tuning the valve, so pretty much every 2 or 3 passes we had what?
Yeah, I mean,
three thou
moving, but you're like, the valve's pulling up in, and just
we kept hanging in there.
So we just kind of decided to keep rolling with the thing, and we made it to, I believe, a 411 that weekend.
Yeah.
And then was it Friday night or Saturday night that finally
Friday night, I believe.
Yeah, Friday night. The valves finally had enough, and I believe it was number 6 intake decided to exit stage left, and our weekend was done. So we left that weekend a little bit bummed about our valve issues, but yet we were really happy with the start that we had. For the first time ever being on radials, we were pretty tickled going 411, and we were like, we're just going to go back. We're going to fix things over winter. We're going to come right back in the spring, and we're going to take off, where we left off. Kind of wanted to do a little bit of, there was a few changes we kind of wanted to make, but we were like, forget it. We're going to go back with as close to what we had so we can hit the ground running in the spring.
Yeah.
And then we did change to top feed injectors.
Switch to a billet converter.
And then that head also had the insert in it because our valve seats kept moving on the old one. So we thought we had fixed some problems, went back and still had some issues in lights out spring with keeping oil in the engine pretty much. Had an old valve cover set up that was kind of fighting us a little bit. Nothing major, just royal pain in the butt, made a mess that we had to keep cleaning up. But then...
that was when we set the record, and we've been chasing the carrot for a 3-second pass, and that's where we got our 399 at 182 miles an hour. Wasn't without fight, because we were still fighting a 5,900 RPM limiter. Every time we would get close to the traps, it would cut out, which ended up being in the ECM. We found a limiter that was buried down in and wasn't populated in our actual tune file, so we thought we had it all. Everything we could see was turned to 6,500, but there was another one that wasn't populated that we found later.
Yeah, we fought fuel caps being left off, one nitrous bottle, and an elimination.
We definitely, I mean, there was a 2-day span there. I think like the first day went pretty good, and then the second 2 days we'll just forget about those. It was probably erase those from history.
It was the type of thing where, do we even know what we're doing?
Yeah,
it was that kind of a feeling.
Like hitting your head against the wall. Like we just made one mistake after another.
Was it Thursday morning? We go out there and first test pass in the morning goes out 399.8.
Yeah,
like it was easy.
Right.
Yep.
No, it was awesome because I remember going up for that pass. We had finally put a clean pass on the board Wednesday night, and we were like, we're going to make, I think we had gone 410 or like, and we had made a small change. We thought maybe we'd get to a 404 or something, and we weren't totally sure that it was going to go down because it's,
the sun was out.
The sun was
daylight
out,
time,
and radials don't like sunshine and hot tracks, which it was early enough in the day that the track wasn't hot yet, but that thing left, and I mean, it was, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember hooping and hollering on the line. I remember
Him in
going
the truck.
back, and I may or may not have cried when I called Carrie. And
Yep.
It's big moments in racing because getting a diesel to play at that, get it in the threes is a big deal.
Yeah.
And that was something that we really wanted. And it's something that you can never erase that. You can't erase history. And so to be the first one to get there is something that makes history. And it's not just like winning an event that it gets forgotten about the next year.
Yeah. And then from there, we had to put it back on big tires to go ODSS racing because a radial will never work on the heat that we race in or the tracks that we race on, just especially with street tires going down it and stuff. So we really thought we could take some of the stuff that we learned from radials and apply it more to the big tire. And for the most part, doesn't really translate. We had to go pretty much back to what we had, and it took us quite a while to get back and running.
It was until midsummer, July at Rocky Top. We ended up running a 418 at Rocky Top with it, and that was the first time we had gone in the teens on a big tire.
Yeah, and that's
really the only time we've ever done that.
Still is the fastest that we've been on a big tire with the truck. Then we ended up.
We got lucky with that too. Switched a bunch of stuff in between there as well, which I guess that irrelative in the sense, but that was
also
a lot of.
Looking back, Rocky Top is where we went last year, and we had.
We broke everything.
Well, we had broken a valve.
Yep.
And we went back, and the truck was just lazy. But it was the heat of summer. We're it's humid. We can't get the thing.
That.
Well, it turns out this winter we discovered that we had a valve stuck in our turbine housing for the whole last part of last year, and we didn't know it.
Yeah, I mean, literally.
Figured out why it was spooling. So we didn't even change the turbo. We put the spare turbo on, but we reused the exhaust housing, and there's literally a puck of the
It was
valve
stuck
down
up
in the
deep
exhaust.
into the twin scroll where we couldn't really see it, and Cody ended up catching it when we were putting the truck together this spring.
I was just looking to clean it up.
Some of the issues we had last fall with the thing being so finicky with spooling up and nitrous backfiring and I don't know. There's a lot of things about last year that I'd be okay with forgetting. But
But in altogether from last year, Fiera came out with a better intake valve that has more meat around it, that we were able to keep the big valve. And just last year, just this spring at Lights Out, we had no intake valve tulipping at all. So that problem we feel is fixed. And just every time we have a failure, you try to find build a better part, and then you get that fixed, and then you find the next weakest link. And that's what the game is when you're chasing to go faster every pass you go out.
These ain't AutoZone parts. I mean,
unfortunately, it's not.
Then last year, with having ODSS racing at the end of the year, and we had enough stuff on our fall schedule that we just saw that it was going to be too much to go back radial tire racing last fall.
Moving shops.
We were moving fab shop. And so we decided to wait till this spring to go back, and went back this February, and never quite accomplished what we wanted.
We wanted to put the truck back in the threes, but we only got it to 402 at 184 miles an hour.
We had gotten our limiter issue figured out, so we were able to run more RPMs, and that issue had gone away. We ran 185.7 miles an hour, which was our best mile an hour. We really had enough things. We couldn't get our 60-foot quite back this spring, and we really were so close. But then we ended up breaking a rocker arm that kind of cut our weekend short. Just about the time we were finally getting it figured out, we broke a rocker arm, which when the rocker arm broke, it broke some other things. We ended up breaking the shaft on the oil pump, which lost oil pressure. We have like a little bit of thrust bearing problem because in the shutdown we were still 3,500 RPM when it lost oil pressure. Just enough there wasn't any way for us to fix it and keep on going. So, and the frustrating part about that is it was a 402 pass, and the rocker broke at 3.97 or 3.7 into the run. And at that point, we were 200 RPMs ahead of our 185 mile per hour pass. So all the data shows we were on the way to do what we wanted to do. We were going to better our 399 pass. We were going to better 185 mile an hour, but we came up about 0.3 of a second short.
And we also were not struggling, but we also swapped
stator again.
Well, stator and rear gear.
Yeah.
No, well, it's the same rear gear that we had last year.
I guess we ran it in 2020, so that would have been that's my bad. I thought
it's the same. Yeah.
But that altogether, that was kind of our journey with the Pro Mod. Is it has been step after step after step to get to 399, and now we're on to 402 in 2022. Now we're going fixing the engine back after our rock arm situation, and then we're going back on big tires, and hopefully we can go faster this year. But we really are we're heavy. Like for a Pro Mod, we're at 3,145 pounds at lights out with all the ballast we had on the nose to keep them from flipping over backwards. And our goal moving forward is to hopefully get into to go faster, and we want to be able to race in the Pro Mod.
And we see some other cars coming, like
Johnny Gilbert.
Shaddy's got his car that weighs 2,800. Gilbert's building a car that should weigh right in that range. The PPI car's coming back out. That one's probably going to be in the 2,700 range. And so we're 400 to almost 500 pounds heavier than those. So we got to figure out how to keep ahead of them.
So pretty much we're going to put Larson on the treadmill, and he's going to run, and we bought him some crystal meth. And,
as long as I can keep my teeth.
But no, in reality, we're going to wrap this up. That was kind of our journey through Pro Mod up until current. Our next series is going to be more about the future and kind of what direction we're wanting to go, and some of the what's the carrot that we're chasing next. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and if you guys have questions, drop it below, and we'll catch you in the next series.